Welcome on behalf of Aspen Institute Kyiv. I'm glad that all the participants managed to join our event today to discuss the topic related to our common future. Before we start, I would like to express a sincere gratitude to our defenders and our genuine compassion to those whose friends or relatives were killed in action, who died defending our freedom and our development path. In terms of our today's event, I would like to emphasize that Aspen Institute Kyiv has been focusing. Dennis should switch to Ukrainian channel because nobody can hear him. Can you hear me now in the Ukrainian channel? Shall I start once again? Once again. Good afternoon, dear participants. My name is Denis Poltavets. I'm the director of the development program at the Aspen Institute Kyiv. And on behalf of our institute, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to discuss an important topic related to the common future. Before we start, I would like to express genuine gratitude to our defenders and our compassion to those who lost friends and relatives, who sacrificed their lives and health for the sake of other people who can continue living normal lives. Aspen Institute Kyiv has been focusing on good governance programs for a couple of years. We hold webinars, roundtables, good governance fora, and other thematic events. However, this full-scale war changed our lives dramatically. That's why we had to review our plans, in particular, our activities related to the development of good governance. The war has also affected the political context of Ukraine. As a result, Ukraine has become the candidate, EU candidate country. Today's topic is creating common future. Education is the key to European integration. It's extremely important, that I'm absolutely sure that our experienced speakers and participants will assure you that it's extremely important to focus on the education and the training of the civil servants prior to becoming the EU member. We hope that this event will help us to become aware of the educational priorities. Another goal is to start the full-scale transformations prior to European integration. Many thanks to our speakers and our participants for the ideas they are supposed to express. We are deeply convinced that the dialogue is the key to consensus, and our concerted actions can contribute to achieving our common goal. I would like to thank the National Civil Service Agency and the Vice Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic integration, who supported this initiative. Also, many thanks to RST at the Cabinet of Ministers for continuous support of our activity. With that, I would like to hand over to Ms. Nataliya Alyushina from the Civil Service Academy. Thank you, Dennis. We've been cooperating for a long time, and we highly appreciate this collaboration. Dear colleagues, Ukraine has indeed become an EU membership candidate. Thus, we are required to implement the EU standards related to professionalization of the Civil Service Institute. The national agency took a number of measures to create good conditions for upgrading skills and the competences of civil servants in terms of European integration. Pay attention to the title of today's event. In this context, I would like to mention that there is a high interest to this topic from the civil servants. Statistics demonstrates the fact that over 32,000 civil servants underwent training in 2019 and 2020. The European integration has been quite a popular direction. Nearly 3,000 civil servants participated in trainings. This year, 1,300 civil servants are going to get training in this field this year. So we've got the respective plans, and the European integration module has been included into over 100 professional training programs. Of course, civil servants also participate in trainings offered by the postgraduate educational facility under our agency. As of now, this facility offers modern European integration programs. It is also possible to study languages there. We've got experienced lecturers and innovative methods. For instance, the high school, in cooperation with the international partners and the Ukrainian experts, including Association for You and Matra, are going to implement the range of short-term professional development programs. Ukrainian civil servants will have an opportunity to undergo internship in other countries. To this end, our high school signed an agreement with the Lech Kaczynski public administration school, and they will also cooperate with the Hague Academy of the local civil government and the National Civil Service Institute from France. And I also have to focus on other important elements. We especially focus on foreign languages, especially civil servants and members of local self-governments have to study English as the main language of international communication. The national agency is very active in this direction. We cooperate with Education First Language Learning Solution. It's an international organization. Within a very short period of time, within 2 months, we integrated the knowledge management platform with the international educational platform. And a big number of civil servants study English free of charge.
National agency with capacity building is a very important cooperation. Within this cooperation, we have introduced an educational program with 3,500 public officials from 2022 to 2023 have the opportunity to get a training for free using 16 online training courses, which open different aspects of functioning of the European Union and development of relations between Ukraine and EU. I would like to say that all of this is very important for civil servants. There are a lot of opportunities for improving their professional skills, and it seems to me that they must do their best in order to improve their skills. In 2023-2025, according to our forecast, about 6,000 civil servants plan to undergo professional courses in European integration. That is why I hope that this will improve capacity building of Ukrainian civil servants, and of course, it will contribute to our development as a state. Thank you so much for your attention. Glory to Ukraine, and I wish you a productive discussion today. Thank you so much, Nataliya. So I will give it over to Yegor for moderating this event. He's a member of the supervisory board of the KSE, and he also works at the Department of Consulting at Deloitte, Ukraine. I give it over to Yegor, and I would also like to thank our highly esteemed speakers who agreed to share their experience with us today. Yegor, over to you. Thank you so much. I am happy to welcome all of you here, and I will switch into English because our speakers today are representatives of the European countries, and our key language today will be English.
We already heard from Ms. Alyushina that basically they are working consciously to introduce the European governance standards, to integrate Ukraine as quickly as possible into the joint European environment. But at the end of the day, this is all down to people who will drive those initiatives, implement those new standards, and so on. And sadly enough, in my opinion, when those discussions are taking place in Ukraine, quite often it is assumed that there is some huge untapped reservoir of people who know English perfectly, who know all the standards, who know how to do it. We just need to somehow open the valve, and those people will do everything for us. But it's not exactly like that. Our civil service is just a reflection of our society at large. In my deep beliefs, this is the case, and not the civil service only would have to integrate into the European Union, but the entire country. All of us would have to support it. And if we have observed anything during the last 18 months, during this full-scale invasion of Russia, we have observed, how actually our civil service is very much similar to the way our society is built. We have observed some tremendous cases of heroism, of self-sacrifice. We have seen civil servants who basically, stood up to the tasks which they never signed up for and helped to defend the country. But we also observed some not so great gaps in culture, in skills, in professionalism sometimes, and this is something we need to develop for altogether. We need to develop it in our civil service, but we also need to develop it in a broader civil society. And this is probably, not so great news. There is no such a huge untapped reservoir which we can just, get access to. We actually have a lot of homework to do. But the good news is that our challenge in this respect is not unique. We're actually approaching a problem in somewhat different circumstances with an additional challenge of war, but we are approaching a problem which has already been successfully solved by several countries, by our friends and neighbors and allies in these times. And representatives of 3 of those countries are actually our eminent speakers today. So let me briefly introduce them. We have with us today Mr. Rafal Hykawy. He's representing Poland, one of our closest allies during today's challenges. Mr. Hykawy was the Director General of the Office of the Committee for European Integration of Poland. And he basically not only observed, but he helped to steer the entire European integration effort in Poland when Poland was going through a similar path. We also have today with us Mrs. Zaneta Ozoliņa. She's a professor at the Department of Political Science in the University of Latvia. a country, yet another country, which had a very similar experience and which has successfully made it through to becoming a full-fledged European Union member. And finally, I'm also happy to introduce to you Mr. Gintaras Steponavicius. He's an ex-Minister of Education and Science of Lithuania. So if there is something in common, among our three guests, those are two things. First, they all represent countries who actually faced similar challenges. Yes, it is true years ago, but still in very similar circumstances if you set aside the question of war. And second, they all are somehow attached to the educational dimension of this challenge, right? They either had to face it directly and basically help their countries overcome the development and educational problem within the civil service, or they have helped to set it up institutionally and organizationally. So with this brief introduction, let me immediately start with throwing questions at our eminent guests, because I hope that this will help them to share some of the lessons learned and some of the experiences they faced, and this may be very relevant and interesting for Ukrainian audiences. And let me start probably with Mr. Hykawy. So, Rafal, can you briefly describe what were the key gaps in professional, but also in broader general skills within the civil service in your country when it started on the EU integration path? And how did you approach solving those gaps? What were the most critical ones? Can you comment on that?
Sure. So first, let me begin by expressing my deep respect for how Ukraine and all of you defend your, but also our independence and freedom. I think that especially in Poland and the neighboring country, we're all aware that this is also a fight for our freedom and independence, and that's why we are trying to help you as much as we can. We still remember that one of the key inspirations for our efforts to join the European Union was the fear of Moscow's unpredictability. Therefore, we hope that Ukraine will join this organization in the very near future. Returning to the subject of the conference, I would need to make a short. I don't know how much time do I have, but before touching the real subject, I have to make a short introduction to show you that comparing the experiences of Poland at the time of the accession negotiations and the current situation in Ukraine, we had completely a different situation. So I will start to be very briefly. So the reality of Poland was that between 98 and the beginning of the accession negotiations, so 98 when the negotiation accessions began, and when they were finalized in 2002, so the participation of universities, but also of the civil service as such, was very, very limited concerning the education of European staff of the ministries. This was due to several factors. So we were in a period of very important historical changes. So we regained independence in 89. In 91, we had first free elections. The civil service was introduced in 97. So these were times where all the public institutions were undergoing processes of long-term, often very difficult reforms, redefining their role and very often replacing the, let's say, old stuff with people having more pro-European attitude. At the same time, we had to introduce all the reforms which were related to our future membership. So as a result, these two processes, so the process of introducing the civil service, the process of universities making necessary preparation to enter the, let's say, education market concerning European integration, and the process of the European integration, the process of becoming member. In reality, there were three, I would say, parallel processes. They were not, synchronized. Sorry for the difficult word, synchronized at the time. Speaking about the universities, so in the mid-90s, where we started our accession, our integration process. So that was no necessary knowledge, information, as well as publication, EU integration on the European integration. There were really single researches on the institutional system, legal system, some European policies, which from the Polish point of view, like agriculture, played an important role. But what was missing at the universities especially was the practical experience. So this was a huge barrier for the universities to enter the process of educating the European staff at the ministries. So at the time, in comparison to today's situation, there was no universal access to European documents. So websites were not so popular. There were no social media. There was no social media, and there was also, let's say, a very limited access to governmental documents. So for researchers at the university, it was in the 90s, a huge problem, not only to obtain the required information, but also to develop own ideas of the functioning and the implementation of very complex European processes. So in our case, I would say that the transfer of European knowledge almost, I think, till the end of the negotiations in 2002, took place in the opposite direction. So from the government, from the administration to the universities. So to give you an example, in the Ministry of European Integration that was responsible for coordinating the accession process, we had a group of professors which were regularly invited by the management of the ministry, by the minister, for informal consultation on all possible aspects of our accession activities. So for the professors, it was the most important source of information about the integration processes. So at the time, the biggest priority for the universities was to be actively involved in all kinds of activities informing about the accession negotiations mainly. So by organizing different conference seminars and all possible cooperation, all possible events in the cooperation with the Ministry of European Integration. Another role that the universities played at the time was, I would call it to objectify the information on the negotiation accession process. So as I said, the beginning, the information about European integration came from the government, from the ministries, and universities were very useful to make this information about very sensitive issues, like, for example, in Polish case, negotiations about agriculture, the results of the negotiations. They, using the non-political character and prestige, they transmitted this information to the public in a way that it was more, let's say, acceptable for people, also the opponents of the accession, because we also had people who were against. Another aspect of the education process, which from your point of view may sound a little bit let's say, paradoxically, very briefly, it became for the universities difficult to enter this education market because we, in Poland, we enjoyed a particular stability of the European staff dealing with European integration. So in comparison to other public institutions, the fluctuation of the staff in the ministries was very limited. So because the job was treated as prestigious, ambitious, it was also better paid, and certainly I would say, from my own experience, so promising and romantic and promising a better future. And so, according to my own estimation, I think that about 80% of those who entered the process mid-90s stayed till accession in the line ministries. So this is really, let's say, important number. I had the opportunity to work for the Ukrainian public administration, and I had the feeling that you are still the people are still moving. Yes, they are beginning the work in the public administration. They learn something and then they disappear because they have different other, let's say, the opportunities. In our case, it was really people were interested to stay in the public administration and work in the sphere of European integration, which made the situation of the universities more difficult because we needed more sophisticated, more on, let's say, we would say today, on demand, tailor-made trainings. So this is to show you what was the let's say general situations which very much differed from yours, and to finalize this brief entry, I would say that the universities in Poland started in reality to take part at the education process somewhere at the end of the accession negotiations, when a part of the integration elite, because it was an elite in the Polish administration, moved to work for the EU institution or left for the private sector. And there was an increased gap, a need to reach for integration graduates or to train Polish official to fill this gap. So this may be as a short introduction before saying how it was organized.
Thank you very much, Rafal. So just to summarize briefly to make sure that I understood you correctly, you basically had significant gaps in sort of professional skills and knowledge of specific standards and approaches to Euro integration in the civil service, and universities were not really able to help you with that because they had similar gaps from the start. They were in the transformation process themselves, but you had another advantage. You had a core of people with the right attitude, which basically sat at the ministries and which first ensured that there is a knowledge transfer towards the universities, and then helped to launch universities on the path of training the broader kind of civil service workforce. Zaneta, if I may switch to you here, is this somehow similar to the approach, to the experience you had in Latvia, or you had something different and your lessons were different in the process?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting and also giving me a floor to share Latvian experience. And I really feel very honored because my first PhD was from Kyiv University, and I even feeling obliged to share my knowledge with my colleagues whom I started very many years ago. To some extent, experience is similar, but it is also different. It is different in a sense that we had to start from scratch. Poland had its own institutions, Academy of Sciences, so research community doing different type of studies. We were part of the Soviet Union, as you know. So therefore, such issue as Europe, European affairs, or whatever, it didn't exist at all. And in the beginning of 90s, around 92, 93, I already had some kind of incentive from the government and also from my university's authorities to start European studies at the University of Latvia within the framework of political science. And I started with debating this issue with my colleagues from different faculties, from different academic institutions. And the funniest response which I've got was from one history teacher who said, but why we have to introduce European studies? So we are already teaching European history. So we have a course on Crusaders, we have course on Swedish king and Swedish times in Latvia. It's about Europe, what we are talking about. So therefore, there was not even acknowledgement that Europe is not, actually that the EU is not 100% the same as Europe. It's a very specific topic. It goes to politics, it goes to negotiations and more and more. So therefore, the beginning was very difficult. But there are always at least two choices. Either you go your own way and you reinvent a wheel, or you just look at best practices internationally and you try to collect those best experiences and try to build your own European studies based on what others already achieved, introduced, and done. And what we did, actually, we tried to combine both. So we didn't reinvent a wheel, because we immediately invited, and also we were invited by our international partners and via different international programs to start European studies. So they offered their own curricula, teaching materials or whatever. But then at the same time, we at the university, and since I was in charge for this program, I had this sense of responsibility towards our society and the government. We didn't have time to go the whole circle of education and in the end to prepare civil servants. We needed them very quickly. So therefore we launched, and it was before actually public administration school, we launched a crash course for civil servants dealing with European affairs as part of master's program at the university. So they came in the evenings, they studied European affairs, international relations, different courses, and then they went actually back to their ministries and they shared this knowledge. But it was at the very beginning. Later, of course, it expanded. But there was another very important point. So there were several dilemmas which we faced, and I will very quickly try to point at what were solutions and how we managed that. So the first dilemma or some kind of misguiding expectation was that if, for instance, in those 2 years' time, we give a very comprehensive knowledge on European affairs, they go to their ministries and they will apply this knowledge in their departments. Actually, it didn't work. The point is that actually the EU is changing, knowledge is very rapidly changing. So it means that those programs which are offered, they have to have a core, but at the same time, ability to respond to what is urgent and what is needed. Another point, and it was previous speaker also mentioned that very many civil servants and those who are educated in European affairs, they leave their posts because they are underpaid and they disappear. And it's definitely true, and it is happening. But the point is, they don't disappear. They actually appear in EU institutions as Euro bureaucrats. And actually, they become a very, very good, let's say, capability for national governments. They know exactly what is happening in Brussels, how to deal with the issues. They receive a lot of criticism, but still, so they are trained people in international organizations, which also can assist in strengthening European integration process. And besides, very often they come back to the government and they actually fill different gaps which are needed in European affairs. And one more point, so I can come back to issues if you will be interested in at the later stage. But at the very beginning, there were very impressive numbers, how many Ukrainian civil servants are learning English. And English definitely is a language number one, no doubts about that. And civil servants in Latvia also took all those courses. But just one example, in 2004, we joined the European Union. In 2015, so 11 years later, we were holding EU presidency. And before the presidency, there were exams, English exams in ministries to check what is the level of the English and whether those civil servants are able to negotiate and actually to be moderators, mediators, when sitting at the table as EU presidency. And it turned out that they are very good at speaking English. But when it comes to terminology, the very specific conversation where you need a very, very specific type of Euro bureaucratic language, they were not good enough. And then very quickly, special English courses were organized in order to prepare Latvian civil servants to function during the presidency. So English is something what you just not only learn half a year or a year, it's something which has to be constantly actually improved and enhanced, particularly if one is working in European institutions. But of course, I can come back again and again. Last point. So I wanted to mention, not to forget it. It's very important that European affairs are taught across the whole circle of education. It's not like 1 year at school or 2 years at the university and then some courses as a public administration school. It has to be integrated across different disciplines, across different years of education, because European integration is not a acquis communautaire. And it's not ministries with their departments of European integration. So it's very much about the way how people identify themselves with Europe. And if education is not built on principles and premises of European integration, it's very difficult to build European identity. It's not enough that geographically you say, oh, I'm in the center or in the north of Europe. You have to think as Europeans. And it requires a quite long period of education and training. I will stop here.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Zaneta. You actually point me towards something I wanted to ask anyway, and I will probably start with Gintaras, just because he hasn't spoken so far yet. But what I hear so far from Rafal and Zaneta is that maybe the importance of general things like right kind of attitude, readiness to invest your time after work hours into self-development, ability to think like a European, and even professional English, not just plain speaking level English, but professional English. Those things may be more important than specific narrow knowledge of certain European standards or techniques, right? Was this also your impression when European integration process was happening in Lithuania, Gintaras? And was this your emphasis in, tilting your educational system to help the European integration? Thank you.
Thank you, Yegor. Colleagues, happy also to join this conversation and with my full heart of support to Ukraine's fight and the course and what is fascinating ability defending yourself to be creative in the challenges you are striving for a European integration context. I will try just very briefly say that definitely the accession process of our countries, including Lithuania, was a longer process. Therefore, we had some more luxury of gradually developing the skills, the capacity, both at educational institutions, but as well as public service key institutions. But I would just point to a number of most important factors which seem to me which were important. One thing, we are not a big country as Latvia is. Poland is more comparable to Ukraine, but we did not sort of create direct instructions to our universities. It was more initiative coming from universities, and we opened the doors. And it was very important because typically the initiative came from the best ones, from the strongest ones, and they were actually able to offer the best quality of be it European studies or then the master programs such as European public administration programs appeared. Then they started to mushroom at other universities across other cities, and I can imagine landscape. You already have good programs at Taras Shevchenko. I know people at Karazin, at Naukma, maybe some other universities, but definitely you will need more intellectual resource employed. Then the second observation would be when as a country we understood that it's kind of our life challenge to get into EU. I think like experience of Rafal would correspond to this. A special, not the ministry, but the Committee of European Integration was formed. It was a spin-off in a way from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I was then the diplomat and saw the picture a little bit from inside. But then creating this body, we said it should be a dream team. It was the best among the best what we had in the country, and a lot of people came from academic circles as well. We said, look, the process, it is not just going to be the scrutiny of technically accepting the rules acquis of European Union, but it will be a need of analytical reflection. The brains and the people who would see the bigger picture, the people who would be able to reflect, is everything just close your eyes and take it or leave it? Or you would reflect, sort out, and then position yourself in the negotiation process. So I think it was extremely important next to the study programs, to training programs, to involve the brains country has into the process. Because again, I'm saying, especially with the size of Ukraine, even with the time constraints and I think lack of space for your longer negotiation process, you will have to have this analytical capacity next to the state level institutions. And I wish if there are among the listeners people here, not to forget this, because the best negotiators will not be able to go forward without people around with other skills needed to complement. And basically, third observation I would have would be that it is not a shortage or problem for us that we did not have experienced people, enough, let's say, experienced people, because nobody was in this endeavor before in the context neither Poland, nor Latvia, nor Lithuania, because simply it was a unique process. Therefore, I think you should take it as a very natural thing that most of your people from public sector with some training behind will have just deliver by learning from the process. And it is inevitable. If you can bring in people with some negotiation skills, that's excellent. If you can involve people from private sector who were doing good job in big companies, mergers, and so on, that would be an excellent thing. And I will just give a comparison. I was involved from the Lithuanian government to help to design a plan of rebuilding of Ukraine. And I saw in the field of education, I was sitting on this group last, I think, most of May and June. And I saw that best minds were brought in. And I think the same exercise should be carried on accession. If you will keep the same approach of having the best minds on board in the negotiation process, it will help. Ukraine at the end of the day will be winning with a higher level of the better results and higher level of the process delivered and conducted on your side. And last thing here, I will say how this capacity of, how to support the dream team, how to make it ready even in these circumstances. Yes, I think it was like Zaneta was mentioning, not, I would say hundreds of people were sent to best universities abroad, to internships, to few months training programs to get the basics of European integration, of European identity, and that helped a lot. I was spending 1 month at a similar course at the Florence University Institute of European Studies, and that gave me huge sort of impetus as well for me to understand how it works, and self-confidence. Then talking to the guys, from the Brussels, very important, and so on. But that was, I think, a very natural thing that what we could do. We used our partners, we used the resources available, and these people coming back contributed to our success story.
Thank you very much. You actually point me directly to the next question I wanted to ask, and this is a question for all three of you. So we can start with you again, or with Rafal, for example. But the question is basically how much you can leverage European Union. So I hear about sending people abroad to European universities. I hear about the practical experience our people could get working in European institutions. But how much this is a push and how much this is a pull in your experience? How much you can rely on the European Union actually providing you this guidance and those tools? Or do you actually have to be inventive and proactive and squeeze it out of them? How did it work in your experience? So we understand the European Union has a lot to offer, but how to get it best? How to get access to all those resources? You may start, Gintaras, I think, and then we will go Rafal and Zaneta.
I think it is like a, how to call it, maybe not a stick and carrot, but it's at least two sides of the coin. Yes, European Union and all the machinery behind will be very supportive throughout the process. But when it comes to understanding your special needs, they will be less sort of warm and apprehending your expectations. Therefore, instead of expecting EU to give you a guidance, general guidelines will be very strict, clear, while complex and bureaucratic. But on the other hand, I think in this process you should rely and talk more to your friends here in the region who were with the last wave of accession, meaning Central Eastern Europe and the Baltics.
Thank you very much. Rafal, what was your experience with this? How much you have to pull it out of the European Union, and how much they will push for it themselves?
So I would say that you have to, find and define your own way, which sometimes resembles at inventing the wheel. Because before you enter the European Union, and you will have people working in European institutions who will come and and tell you how it is functioning, transmit the practical knowledge. It will take a lot of time. Yes? So you have to say, prepare yourself for this exercise. And in our cases, we were looking for this, let's say, practical experience, which for us was the most important one. And as I said in my introduction, this practical knowledge was not available at the universities. So what we did in principle, and we had no, say, almost any other option. So we turned west. So meaning that that the whole education process concerning the European stuff, which was, by the way, managed by the Ministry of European Integration and not by the Ministry of Education, was that we signed a lot of different, usually privileged agreements with College of Europe, European University Institute, which was already mentioned, ERA, APA, different national institutions like the German Austrian Verwaltungsacademies and similar. And for us, it was the places where obviously after a certain general introduction in the subject, where we could meet people from the member states, people from the European institutions, yes, and there we could really discuss the problems we had, yes. So, for example, how to organize our European coordination system, what are the practical aspects of EU negotiations, what are the practical aspects of the implementation of sectoral policies, and what was of very big importance before we acceded the European Union, what were the very concrete experiences of the new member states, so the countries that joined before us. So so this was, you know, our main tool, yes, to have as much as possible contacts with practitioners, yes, to develop our own ideas how to organize our accession process, how to develop the necessary tools, instruments, and how to be prepared for the membership, because this is, you know, preparing and entering the European Union. These are, you know, two different processes.
Okay, thank you very much. Zaneta, what was your experience with this?
Yeah, before I start about our experience, very quickly, a few sentences on the choice, either generalist or specialized education.
Of course.
Actually, both are very important, and particularly in Ukraine's case, since Ukraine is a big country, you can go both ways. So in Latvia, it wasn't the case. We had to be generalists and jumped in whenever it was needed. But just as an example, for instance, 3 top experts in Latvia on climate change, they are political scientists. They graduated our program of European studies, but then they built on this generalist approach specific knowledge, which made them experts. If they would be specialists only on climate and environment or whatever, they would miss this European perspective. So therefore, this combination probably is the best way how to go. But when it comes to European institutions' push and pull approach, I would start with the first premise. You have to know exactly what you want to get out of EU institutions. If you just come to Commission or Parliament and you will say, oh, could you assist us in whatever, something? They would say, thank you, it's not our business because there is no acquis, we do not regulate national educational system, go and do it on bilateral level or whatever. But if you know exactly what you want to achieve, then the next step would be to find the right person in the right institution, in the right office. And then you can get a lot out of it, because you will find their supporters who would like to help Ukraine in whatever possible ways, and they will find the path to either right person or to finances or to whatever. So by the way, it's do not neglect European Parliament, because we tend to go to European Commission, and rightly so. But European Parliament has its special subcommittees. They have support groups. They have their own research unit, and more and more and more. So therefore, there is a possibility, not on the national level, but at least on institutional level or regional level, to get assistance from the Commission or European Parliament, but again, on the conditions that you know exactly what do you want. And another point, I hope nobody now nobody listens from European EU representation in Ukraine, otherwise they will get mad at me. But the first institution where to go is EU mission in Ukraine, because they have the best knowledge of programs, best knowledge of partners. There are numerous visitors programs when teachers can go and to visit different EU countries. By the way, top group of professors who are experts in EU affairs, they all started via European delegation representation in Riga through their visitors program. Yeah, so there are very many mechanisms, and of course, not forget Erasmus Plus as well. Yeah. But it's again, you have to know what do you want in the end. If you want just to visit a beautiful country, then unfortunately there will be no outcome later on. But if you know exactly what you want, you will achieve it, and you will find paths.
No, I think we're not tourists, on this trip. We are more like pilgrims. We have a certain goal ahead of us. I hope at least, most of the civil servants recognize it. I'm addressing now briefly, everyone who is listening to us right now and who is watching us. You have an opportunity to post your questions in the comments to this webcast, and we will try to pose them to our guest speakers. So basically, if you want, you can address those questions. But meanwhile, let me continue with another question, which I think could be addressed to everyone here. But which is the one I don't have an answer to, right? So at the end of the day, we discussed that there are many institutions who potentially have a role to play here, public and private universities, and potentially NGOs and think tanks who could establish training programs. And of course, the ministries in charge of the European integration per se, who could actually kickstart the whole process. And the European Union, if you activate it in the correct way. But at the end of the day, you cannot teach someone unless he or she wants to be taught, right? And we are not talking about training, I don't know, like 5,000 or 10,000 people. The civil service, the central civil service in this country is approximately 200,000 people, right? And if you actually go broader than that and expand your scope to the overall public sector, we are talking about millions of people who are engaged in running municipal governments, get elected for the local radas and run the state-owned enterprises, for example, right? We are talking about a couple million people. What could boost their motivation, basically, in your experience? How did it work? When you move down from the, top 10,000 people to the broader scope, and when you have this huge ambition in front of you to actually train and help in development to tens of thousands and even hundreds of thousands of people, how do you address this challenge? Rafal, let's start with you on this, if you don't mind.
Okay, so you mentioned a very, very important problem. So obviously there's the, let's say, the question how to motivate 1,000 people or even more, yes, to start, which are in the administration, to engage into education processes related to European integration. But myself, as I'm for 30 years still public servant, so I was working 10 years in the Ministry of European Integration. And from my perspective, it was most important to make this training offer as much as interesting possible. So you need to have in mind that people who work, I mean here this European stuff, which in our case before accession there were some I don't know, maybe 400 people or something like this, that these are people which, the job is related with, usually with adrenaline, because you have, before the accession, to do a lot of things very often in a very quick time. You are doing something for the prime minister, for the government, for European institutions. You are young, you are participating in the meetings at the high level. And then when you want to, have a training, it must also be in a way exciting. So therefore, the way we have chosen, so organizing this the scholarship, these trainings mainly in foreign institutions, was in having the opportunity really to meet practitioners. Yes, because for us, after 1 year of general training, it was very, very important to have this practical dialogue. So it was really exciting, apart from, going to Paris, Berlin, or Amsterdam 2 or 3 times per year. Yes, so we made these trainings really, really attractive, and for many people, it was also a kind of, let's say, self improvement, because in our case we had, for example, lawyers that were dealing with, again, agriculture for 15 or 10 years. Yes, so each year you had to find something attractive for them, and we had, after 1 or 2 years, we started the accession to change the approach. So it was our people that were indicated where they want to go. Yes, and the role of the ministries of the Ministry of European Integration was mainly to pay and to send them there. Yes, this was the way how we made the process attractive, because they learned each time really something new. It was not always the same. Yes, this was always something that they really needed, and at the end of the process, many of them became real I'll say super experts. Many of them went to the universities, many of them went to the European institutions because of this attractivity also of the job.
Thank you very much. Gintaras, same question. What worked in terms of motivation for a broader set of civil servants?
Well, first of all, should you aim to convert all this 2 million or hundreds of thousands into becoming enthusiasts? No, you should not. It's impossible. You better reform the civil service sector, the service as such. I think Lithuania has not come to a sort of core reform, or has not yet succeeded in it, to make it more efficient, result-oriented, and so on. I think it's more about reforming the whole public sector. Then the motivation would be sort of embedded in it in itself. There will be hundreds of thousands of people who will not be happy because the habits of their sort of long life experience within ministries and so on will have to change because of the European Union membership and Ukraine being part of it. So I think at the stage of accession and preparing for it, it is crucially important to invest into the most capable people and those who are already enthusiasts, and they truly connect that membership is not just a hope, but really a clear way to the higher prosperity, better, wealthier, and so on, and also for themselves personally. And I think connecting it, there are many ways how to show. It is important also to show that the self-dignity of Ukraine in the process of negotiation should be reflected, and that civil servants are important part of this process, defending also in any, at least some way, interests of Ukraine in the negotiation process, because some compromises here will have to be done. And yes, these people, after training, after support from different best experiences from abroad, at the end of the day will have to be the ones who will be on behalf of Ukraine, standing and defending your negotiation positions. So I think the more capable and motivated people you will have, at least in charge of European affairs at the initial stage, it will be at least already something. How to achieve, there are different ways. Ukraine already did some good examples of trying to have higher level experts at the ministries, but maybe it should be more systemic than just a few different cases. And again, I think it is a gradual process, and even if it is not quick solution, I think there should be some patience and persistence in the process.
Okay, thank you very much. Zaneta, what's your perspective on this?
Yes, thank you. Since I'm not a civil servant, but I have worked 4 years for the Commission and 4 years in the Commission. So my answer will be based on my experience of Euro bureaucrat. And first of all, I think we have to be honest with civil servants. And EU business is very boring, very, very boring, and very technocratic. There is nothing exciting. There is nothing to be enjoying of. But it's very important to understand why it is so bureaucratic and so technocratic. It's because we are talking about interests of 27 member states. And in the end, those different interests have to be compromised. And civil service also in Ukraine will face the situation, and they will have to defend their own interests. But looking at the wider European perspective, context is very important in that respect. But what makes work of civil servants really very appealing, very rewarding, it is the end result. And usually this process of negotiations, drafting documents is very long, boring. But when you achieve the result, you immediately see the difference. And particularly, I think that it could be the case with Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, I don't know so well, Polish case. But if you look at EU funds, how they have been invested in renovating roads, in rebuilding small towns, and I made with my colleague some kind of teaching educational film about regional development in Latvia. And there are 15 minutes how one city looked in 94, 95 when Russian troops left Latvia, and how the city looks now because of civil, public administration, European bureaucracy, and more and more and more. Process is long and difficult, but the results, the fruits of the work, they are very, very rewarding. And they are rewarding not only for this particular civil servant, but it's very rewarding for region and also for nation as such. And I think that this could drive the motivation to study, to learn, and really to raise professionalism of each civil servant.
Thank you very much. We actually do have some questions arriving from the audience. So being mindful of the time, I will probably switch to those so that we make sure we address at least some of them. And again, given the deficit of time, I will probably take the liberty of shooting those questions, individually, to make sure that most of them are answered. And I'll start with you, Zaneta. There is a question which was actually specifically addressed to you. So in your European affairs program, right, which you set up and you briefly discussed it today, what was the proportion of private students applying and studying at their own expense, out of their own free will, and the sort of public students directed by their
Yes.
employer?
Yeah, this is an excellent question. Actually, this proportion can change. And before the accession, this proportion was approximately 25%, 25 students were paid by the public funds, and approximately 50% or 50 students, they were paying for themselves. But very often, by the way, this tuition fee was covered by respective ministries. They actually sent their civil servants to study in this program in order to, again, to work in EU affairs department. But if we are looking at the present moment, then this proportion is completely different, because the interest in this program and also need in civil servants, which could be only trained in EU affairs, is going down. It's very important that you have this interdisciplinary type of education, when students can take some courses in faculty of law, some courses in faculty of economics, and then actually have this mixed type of expertise. But now almost all students are paid by public funds.
Interesting. Thank you very much for this answer. Gintaras, I will probably shoot the next question at you, if you don't mind. So the question was, did the state in Lithuania, it was not in Lithuania, but I guess in your specific case, you can comment about Lithuania, did the state somehow encourage the private educational institutions to invest into setting up, European affairs or public administration programs specifically supporting European integration? Did the state provide any, financial incentives or whatever, or did the market just sort it out by itself?
Well, it's not easy to answer. Initially, I think it came from the biggest public universities. They themselves decided to set up the programs. They accredited them. They enrolled students, and there was, in a similar way as Zaneta was describing, on this wave, it was a big interest and demand. But I would say that I truly believe, and I always, also from the practical policy point of view, did everything that equal conditions for public and private education providers should be created. I believe in competition also in education, and I think it is important that to give a choice for students, to give a choice also for researchers from different institutions to participate in bids. And I'm happy to say that especially when we already were getting into the process of real negotiations, private sector was very active, first of all, in trying to have their say in assessing the impact, especially when it came to the sectoral conversations, energy, agriculture, and a number of private or business associations were employing a number of think tanks to provide these services. But this practice also was applied by the government institutions, and quite substantially. When we were preparing for chairing European Union, the training for public servants, which was sort of a big wave of people need to be ready for being involved. It was organized on a tender basis, and one private think tank won a bid together with public university. So it was a consortium, and they did excellent job because they were the best sort of collection of the people, both experts from let's say those analytics in think tanks, combined with the perhaps best academicians and lecturers, and I believe that could be a practice. There will be a room under the sun, both for public institutions, but the window and doors should be opened for all stakeholders and players. And I think, interestingly enough, one of the reasons why, I will answer why it happened, that private sector and also private providers were involved, was that after we got into the European Union, some of the people from this dream team which were negotiating, they went to private sector, created think tanks, created consultancies, and that was the way that this know-how was partially at public universities, but also to a large extent at some private sector, non-governmental sector.
Thank you very much. I have another question from the audience, which I want to throw at Rafal now, but I also see the hand raised by Ms. Alyushina, so immediately after that, I will give the word to her, okay? So Rafal, you mentioned that, just 1 minute, another question to Rafal, and then I will give the word to you. So Rafal, basically the question which I think fits you very well, because you mentioned that universities in Poland, when you were on the accession path, they were not ready actually to provide training quite often. And sometimes you had to leverage the educational programs of European universities, and people were going abroad. So the question is, consisting of two parts. Did you actually kind of use it in a centralized way? Did you send the people there? And if yes, how did you fund it? Was it like a significant financial commitment from the Polish government, or were you mostly leveraging the help of European countries? How was it structured, if it was at all? You're on mute, Rafal. If
the universities were maybe to be more precise, were not ready when it came to the needs of the European staff working in the ministries. They were ready, but at the at the end of the negotiation to provide European studies for young students, for people just entering the civil service, but not for those who were really doing the main job. Concerning sending people to those institutions, universities that I mentioned, we were in a very lucky position that we had a lot of money. So the money came from European institutions, from our budget, but also from bilateral aid, which was we had several agreements with different countries before we entered we started the negotiations with the European Union, and this money was transformed into money supporting the accession process. So this was a very important factor in our education and policy, that we could send people almost everywhere. There was quite a difference between the Ministry of European Integration, who was managing the majority of the funds, in the line ministries. So here the line ministries had often to use the money we disposed of, and it was interesting that we as a Ministry of European Integration, coordinating the process, we used the possibility to send people from other ministries in the coordination process. So to give you an example, a minister from, say, again, agriculture, calling our boss and saying, I have two excellent people. They have already, after 3 years, burn-off syndrome. I want to send them somewhere, and they want to go to Florence. Yes, and then my minister is saying, I can do this for you, but first you have to adopt or elaborate two laws that we need in our accession process. So this was, a very important instrument in our coordination process.
Thank you very much for this very honest answer, I should say. Ms. Alyushina, you wanted to ask something.
Thank you so much. It was a great pleasure. With great pleasure, I was listening to all this event, to your experience shared. Right now, I have several thoughts, and I also have my own experience and our own challenges that we faced. In my opinion, we really need all programs to be unified. I mean, those education programs that would be provided by state or private universities. What I mean that we need to unify all these programs using relevant sections of the EU acquis, EU legislation. They have met unified standards, and we have to use unified approaches. Because if different education providers will have different education programs, we won't look professional enough. Right now, I'm talking to our international partners and colleagues. They might agree with me or not. We had cases when there was different level of educational programs, different approaches used, and it didn't work properly together. It doesn't correspond to the high level of education and skills that we transfer to our civil servants. Thank you.
A very interesting question, and I will very briefly summarize it for you just to make sure that everyone is on the same page regarding it. So it is a very strong observation and opinion of Ms. Alyushina that there is a need for a sort of national standard for the European affairs programs offered to our civil servants today. And would you support this opinion? And what are your thoughts on this? How important is this? And is this a priority now? Zaneta, can we start with you?
Yes, thank you. It's very, very relevant question. But I would be very cautious, not excluding, but cautious, still to think about those standards. It's a question how you define those standards. If it is just about the core, what is the minimum knowledge, then that's fine. But if it goes deeper, then actually you could miss something, or probably there will be no experts on this issue. So you see, it's a very tricky. We are now facing this very similar situation in Latvia's schools. There is a standard of how to teach social sciences, but there are no details in this standardized program. These are main themes and some examples, but then it is up to the teacher how he teaches it. In case of civil servants, probably it should be different because you need more. You need very specific knowledge about negotiations, EU legislation, and so on. Yeah, but again, it should be flexible. There should be, if it's like a square, you have to have doors almost in each of those signs to open it up if something fresh comes in. So there should be some maneuvering in it rather than very strict standardization. I would say so, but I still have to think about that because I understand that in your case, it's very needed because we are talking about a very large number of civil servants which came out of the school system, education system, which was not too much focused on the EU affairs, yeah? So you have to fill double gaps in it, yeah? So at the present moment, probably yes, but later on, more flexibility, it would be my response. Yeah, but it's very challenging.
Thank you very much. I see Gintaras wants to add something.
Yeah, I think when it comes to harmonization of Ukrainian law with the European, then it's understandable that it should be harmonized. But when it comes to training, I don't agree. Because generally, even in the size of Ukraine, who can provide the quality or not. And simply going into the very much bureaucratically sort of putting the providers into the some kind of harmonized standard, with some exceptions, language skills, the basics, like Zaneta was saying, I agree. But then there is so much room of different way to approach it. And wouldn't you be trusting UKU who are the best university if they would decide to have a European studies program? Or would you like to put them into the sort of frame of the state designed standard? I'm not sure. I think we have to start trust also universities and academic communities that they are able. And of course, if the money from the governments will be spent on training, then yes, there should be ingredients which have to be covered. But how they will be covered, it's up now for the providers, for institutions, be it universities or some other training institutions to decide. There should be, how to say, unified content will never mean that it is rated to quality, or not necessarily correlates with quality, if you catch what I have in mind.
No, I think it is quite clear. Thank you very much. Rafal, do you want to add something to this? You're on mute again, sorry.
Speaking from my experience, so I think that at least you need two separate paths. So for those managing the process and those that must be aware of EU issues, because everybody working in the public administration needs to be aware of, you know, the functioning of the European Union processes, etc., etc. So as I said previously, I think you need the first one, so those managing the process, to create the effective education system, and the priority must be to stay these people in the public administration. And as I tried to visualize on the Polish example, the key element is to do it is to use training as a real motivation tool, so as an instrument enhancing the stability of staff. And I think that in case of Ukraine now, it's maybe the most important tool that you have at your disposal, because it's not the salary, it's not the perspective of membership or in the future, as it was in the case of Poland. And at the end, I would like to say again, returning to our example, so we in Poland, we consider the education and training activities not only from the perspective of our EU aspirations, but also as a driving force of our public administration reform, because in Poland, it was really the accession process, the people who participated in that were the most important factor stimulating the public administration reform. So again, one of the priority of this education policy should be the creation of a European elite in your country. So this is my advice.
Thank you very much. We're almost out of time. We basically have 3 minutes left, and I want to address you with my final question, which is basically providing you with an opportunity to say some concluding remarks. You know, given your experience and given everything we discussed today with you, what would be your advice? Which, you know, 2-3 things in this area, in the area of developing public servants, Ukraine should do even now, even during the war, in the next, let's say, 6-12 months. If there are any things like that, if you have a position on that. Gintaras, do you want to start on this one?
3 concluding quick points. First, you have to rely on the best resources available in Ukraine, make them in different ways, but involved. This second point would be also should be taken into account, thinking not only about training and study programs, but also involving universities, the brains Ukraine has in the process of impact assessment. And this should be not only left to the business people and associations, but also to state institutions when they design the whole process of negotiations. And third, rely on your friends, work in a more collaborative way, ask those who still remember how the process of accession went, This would apply not only to state institutions talking to the state people, but also universities. Easier to build up good quality program together with the reliable partner universities in Europe, and that would create a faster track, more prestige around it, and also I think that would be also a beginning of Ukraine becoming part of Europe.
Thank you very much. Rafal, do you want to continue on this? Your 2-3 priorities.
Yes, so I already mentioned. So my most important point is to to enhance this European elite, which is I think one of the most important things in the process. The second, which I may add after the first comment. So it's important to adjust the training offered to the developments of the accession process, because today you need experts and lawyers on European policies. Tomorrow you will need experts and negotiators, and after tomorrow you'll have to be ready to fully participate in the EU decision-making process. So this educational offer must be adjusted to the development of the integration process. And maybe the last remark, I think that this is important to, if I'm not mistaken, today the GOI, as the office responsible for European integration, is not involved in coordinating the European trainings in public administration. I think it should be probably much more involved in the process, because again, the Polish experience is that it's sometimes difficult from the point of view of external coordinator that is not sustainably involved in the integration process to make the optimal assessment of the needs, as well as make this quiet adjustment I just mentioned.
Thank you very much. Zaneta.
Yes, thank you. I have a couple of points which I wanted to mention at the very end very quickly. First of all, I would like to mention such an activity or endeavor as how to creating different networks among organizations, institutions, associations in Ukraine. Its center of Kyiv has already enough knowledge capabilities, but it's very important to identify and also to advance knowledge on European affairs across the whole country. The second point would be have a constant communication with EU institutions. I already mentioned the European Commission, European Parliament, because they also have not only financial resources at your disposal, but they could offer lecturing, practical lecturing on practical issues. They can offer different type of programs for European experts in your universities, and also programs for your professors in European universities. And the last point which I wanted to mention is bring into your institutions long-term visitors from EU countries and exploit them in all possible ways. Lecturing, drafting curricula, building research capabilities, promoting inclusion into different networks, and more and more. So, and again, I would like to wrap it up. It's a good thing to invent a wheel, but better is to drive stable, good, solid, and very innovative wheel, which is created jointly by 27 member states. And you will be soon one of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So our time is out, and basically I will not make any sort of long summaries here, but I would like to thank all of our guest speakers today. I think this was a great discussion. At least I enjoyed it very much, and I think we heard some of the very interesting, specific practical bits of advice from your experience, but we also heard some very important strategic things which must be kept in mind. And to me, this is even more important, I guess. What is even more important, I think we we can be sure after this conversation that in this whole process, we have friends in the European Union that stand with us today, and that, even more importantly, are ready to go with us, along the way in the future, in the coming years, on this Euro accession path of Ukraine. Thank you very much. This was very insightful, and I am very grateful. If the Aspen Institute Kyiv has any concluding remarks, I'm happy to pass the word over to them. I am thanking you once again and thanking the audience for being with us today.
До перемоги, друзі.
Дякуємо.
Thank you very much.
Дякую.
Thank you.
Слава Україні, на все добре.
Героям
Слава
слава.
Україні.